Liberated, freed, released, free from traditional social restraints, sisters, girls or women who share a common ancestry, allegiance, character, or purpose with another or others, fellow Black women or girls.
In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, Assalamu alaikum, peace and blessings. Happy Savior's Day to those who know what time of year it is, the birth of our Savior for the Nation of Islam, Master W. Father Muhammad, really humanity. I'm Sister Charlene Muhammad, the host of Liberated Sisters, and today we're excited to have you join us because we have a special guest, per usual, and our panel, Sister Dr. Christina Parks, Cellular Molecular Ph.D. in biology. She will be with us talking about a new study out of Germany that says that the test for COVID-19 drove up the infection rates. We're going to find out what all of this is about. She's going to make it real plain for us. And also joining us is Dr. Ridgely Muhammad of the Nation of Islam Ministry of Agriculture and Muhammad Farms in Georgia, who will help as well for us to understand this. We're going to pose some questions to Dr. Christina Parks. We invite you to do the same. But first, we have Sister Attorney Pamela Muhammad, who is going to bring us the Liberated Sisters Justice Report for today. Let's bring her right in. Sister Pamela, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, ma'am. Yes,
How are you
ma'am.
doing?
So, go ahead.
How are you doing?
I'm doing fine today. It's been a really hectic day, sister, this Thursday, but I thank Allah for his blessings and his mercy. Yes, ma'am. And it's interesting because last week I mentioned how the sisters, you talked about Liberated Sisters, and it reminded me to give a compliment to our sisters, our beautiful sisters. And I just want to take the opportunity once again to raise Sister Tahira Muhammad, who was the main lecture on our weekly webcast from national headquarters. And I just want to say that she, along with all of our beautiful sisters, did an excellent job. And they really remind us, especially today, where the Black woman or women in general are not shown to be God's women. They're not exhibiting those qualities of being God's women. And so our sisters, I just want to once again say, they were so fabulous in exhibiting themselves as women of God's and giving that example to our people. And I just wanted to start with that because we got to make sure we keep pointing people back to those beautiful sisters and the message they gave. Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you so much. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And
You're
so
welcome.
I will put up the data for you, our great Final Call newspaper. And thanks for highlighting that for Liberated Sisters.
Yes, ma'am. So to get on point with the justice report, Sister Charlene. So February 16, 2026, Final Call newspaper, an article by Sister Anissa Muhammad entitled Eviction Rates, Gun Violence, and Young Black Men. And as always, our sister Anissa Muhammad, staff writer for the Final Call, she does excellent work as she points out that there's an increase in gun violence. There's a study that shows there's an increase in gun violence, and they are tying that to eviction rates. Pretty much what they're saying is that as eviction rates increase, you also see potential gun violence also increasing, and it makes sense. She said specifically, the study found that every 1% increase in the census tract eviction rate was associated with a 2.66 additional shootings within 100 feet of an individual's home. You know, the study, it pretty much looking at the disproportionate numbers of Black people who are evicted as we look in our communities that have been divested in terms of, you know, not having the type of resources available and the higher impacts of people who the income rates aren't as high in other communities. So when we look at these eviction rates in and how they impact, the article is talking about gun violence and crime due to potential eviction. So they really bring out the point of how when people are displaced, when people are evicted, you're going to see many times material hardship, meaning, you know, potential we can't pay these rents. And we got to say a lot of these homes have been bought and they are ran by people who do not, landlords who don't provide the minimum sometimes of the repair and just, you know, decent places to live. So again, we're seeing material hardship as a result of eviction. We're seeing depression as a result of eviction, and we're seeing stress higher. And, you know, again, we're looking at low wages, high rents, and rent increases. And, you know, again, people are being exposed to more crimes as a result of evictions. And I think one of the major issues, because she talked about how gun violence is concentrated in certain neighborhoods. And she quotes in her article that in Chicago, firearm violence is concentrated on the South and West sides, which are majority Black and Latino, with a history of structural divestment, disinvestment, resulting in residential segregation, economic exclusion, and stark gaps in life expectancy. So with this gun violence and people who are being displaced, people who are moving around, people who are having their clothes and all their items being set out, you know, another word for this is trauma. So the study also reflected that there's a lack sometimes of collective efficacy when you talk about the role of eviction. And what it's saying, efficacy is defined as a community's belief in their ability to achieve a shared goal. It's found that neighborhoods with high eviction rates, lower collective efficacy, again, these shared goals, there's a strong link to gun violence, high gun violence. And again, I think going back to, we have to make our communities decent and safe places to live. You know, what we're saying with this efficacy is that we're not neighbors anymore. You know, people being displaced, we're not acting like brothers and sisters sometimes in these communities. And as the study notes, it's easier to shoot someone that you don't know. So if you're moving from place to place to place, you're not having the type of ties, and people are already angry. But then, you know, you're around strangers. And so I wanted to close this article because I think it's given us some keys to some of the things we need to look at. So, looking at the words of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, National Representative of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And she states that he has taught Black people the importance of working in and taking care of their communities. He advocates for young Black men to be given opportunities to learn a trade, skill that would benefit them and their communities. To quote the minister, he says, "You cannot ask the brothers to put their guns down if you do not have anything for them to do in return. You cannot give them lip service. Brothers have children, brothers need jobs and income." Minister Farrakhan said in a special message to street organizations delivered in Newark, New Jersey on December the 11th, 2004. The minister goes on to say, "That's why I'm concerned about these city budgets. Why can't city governments set aside money to train these brothers in building skills?" He questioned. Minister Farrakhan outlined the process that would help young Black men do good for their communities. And so I just want to skip down. The minister talks about when you start building, you control the streets. But right now, you do not own any part of the streets that you control. And the minister says, "What good is controlling a street if you do not own it?" Minister Farrakhan questioned, "You have to own it. Then you are justified in controlling what you own. Then when you own it, you want it run right. From there, the young men should get involved with their city council to represent the concerns of their people," he added. The minister closes, and she closes this article by quoting the minister, "I do not want to see my brothers lose the promise of God." Minister Farrakhan said, "They are the leaders of today and tomorrow, but they must be protected so they can grow into the manifestation of their powers." And I just think that's a beautiful article regarding helping the young Black men, looking at gun violence. And this study shows there's a tie where eviction rates are high. And I just wanted to close really quick with giving note that there is an article in the final call regarding St. Louis. And the article is entitled "Resilience and Rebuilding St. Louis. The Struggle Continues After the Storm." And, I think this is an excellent article by our brother J.A. Salam, who is the contributing writer. And he just really wanted to let people know that the inequalities that exist, again, we're looking at communities that have been divested, Black communities. And so when they were hit in St. Louis with this category EF3 tornado, that was 165 miles per hour. This is the speed that the tornado tore through St. Louis. And this was about nine months ago. It did hit predominantly Black neighborhoods along with others, but the Black neighborhoods are still struggling to come together, and amidst racism in terms of the money that's being given, the way the insurance companies are treating the people in St. Louis, the way the redlining that already existed. These are some of the issues that Brother Salam is raising in this article. And I just encourage people to read it so we can be aware as well as continue to pray for our families. So that's it for me. He calls, again, unity and resiliency is a characteristic that Black people are really having to form and to stand on during these times. So again, that article regarding resilience and rebuilding in St. Louis, it can also be found in the February 16th, 2026 volume of the Final Call. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, alaikum salam, and stay right there, because what I'm scrolling to as we get ready to make way for Dr. Christina Parks and Dr. Ridgely Muhammad is this, which is the cover story. First, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's center page article, The Reality of God. And beneath that, we have Savior's Day 2026. The Nation of Islam is returning to Detroit for its annual convention. That is February 19th through the 22nd. And we are in our annual Savior's Day gift drive. We'll have more announcement about that and the show of love for the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan later on in the broadcast. Ramadan Mubarak as well. This will be a time where we are also going to be in our holy season of Ramadan. And so this is a very exciting time for the Muslims, and I would say for the world. And so, Sister Attorney Pamela, thank you so much for bringing us the Justice Report. And I will make way now with a video to announce the next segment coming in with Dr. Christina Parks. Actually, before I do that, well, I would like Dr. Ritchie to have opening remarks, but we'll do that after I show this brief clip, okay? Thank you all. Spread the word. Liberated Sisters, Sister Charlene Muhammad, and guests.
Prosecuted as that may have been a auto pen pardon, and Trump just all of a sudden now there's talk of Anthony Fauci being prosecuted as that may have been a auto pen pardon, and Trump just said they might revoke those pardons. This study looked at this German lab. You can think of it as the command center of Germany's PCR testing. So these researchers went and looked week by week the differences between PCR positive rates and antibody positivity rates. So antibody positivity, if you are positive, that means you were infected. With the PCR tests, they found that 86% of those who had a positive PCR reading, 86% did not have antibodies. So they weren't actually currently infected. So what this means is only 14% in the early pandemic, only 14% of PCR positive cases represented true infections. So, I mean, that means that basically all of this stuff, all of these cases, and here in America, 14 days to slow the spread, and I know there were similar things in Europe. This was all based on a seemingly fraudulent metric. This should be on the front page news of every major news organization, because the past 4 years, we went through the lockdowns. People's lives were shattered. They lost their jobs. They lost their livelihoods. And it was all based on now a verifiably highly flawed test that in which only 14% represented true infection. So there really should be a form of accountability, and we have to start talking about this, because this cannot happen.
This cannot happen again, he says. Now, the person that you just heard speaking there is Master of Public Health Epidemiologist Nicholas Hoscher. He is with the McCullough Foundation. And again, he reported on this new study out of Germany. So here to help us understand this and make sense of it all. And I think I even will put a slide up of a definition for PCR tests, although we have heard it over and over and over again, and some of us have been subject to it. I think I will do that as she begins to talk. I would like to bring on the dearly beloved Sister Dr. Christina Parks, Ph.D. in Cellular and Molecular Biology, to take us further into this. And soon, God willing, we pray to have Dr. Ridgely Muhammad with his remarks, who will join us in the dialogue. But trust me, put any question that you have for Dr. Parks in the chat, and we will make sure she gets that. Assalamu alaikum. Peace and blessings, Dr. Parks. How are you? Unmute.
Peace. Excellent. Thank you.
So radiant. You're always so radiant. Thank you for joining us, taking time out of your super busy schedule to help us understand what this study is, just how did we fall for this?
Well, I think many of us didn't fall for it, but it was
Mm.
all over the news. I remember one morning I was getting around with the kids and whatnot, and the TV was on, and my anxiety started going through the roof. And then I realized, oh, somebody had turned ABC on. Like I never watched the mainstream
Wow.
media. And
Uh-huh.
there was this ticker tape across like how many positive cases, how many deaths. And it like, even though I knew better, it created all this anxiety in me. And I was like, why am I so anxious? I'm like, oh, click, let me turn the TV off. Like, I know that that's garbage, but everyone didn't know it was garbage. Those of us who were scientists did know that the PCR testing was really problematic. And so there's a lot to this paper. Actually, there's a lot of different things it showed. And I think it's really important. But the main is that the PCR testing was a fraudulent metric. It was never how we should have measured infection. And they specifically say in the paper that basically they say they measured antibody levels. When you get an infection, after about 2 weeks, your body, okay, so here we have a polymerase chain reaction. So let's
Go ahead.
talk about since you put that up, let's actually talk about what that means in English. So you may as well take it down because like nobody knows what that means. Okay.
I can show that.
All right. So let's say in your house, you have a bunch of books, right? And you only want to know if you have War and Peace by, what is that, Fyodor Dostoevsky? Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But you just want to know if you have this one book, okay, which would be like the COVID virus. You just want to know if you have the one. So what you do is you take these, you do a PCR testing, and you use these PCR primers. And what they are is like maybe one sentence from the front of the book and one sentence from the back of the book. So remember, I believe in War and Peace, it says, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, okay? This is just an example. I'm not a literature major, right?
Right.
And then you would take the last sentence from the book, all right? And then you would put those primers in, and they would kind of like go over every book, and where they found it's the best of times, the worst of time, they would settle in. And then they found the end one, and then they would copy everything in between, which would be the whole book of War and Peace, right?
Okay.
So now you have two books. You have the one you started with, and you have an extra one. Then you would go to the second cycle. And so now you would copy both of those books, and you would have 4. When you did the third cycle, you would copy those 4 books, and you would have 8. Then you would have 16. Okay. So this is based on your one copy of War and Peace, right?
Right.
So if you had, and so it is actually exponential, because every time you go from 8 to 16 to 32 to, right, it doubles every time. And this is how they amplified the signal of the virus. You didn't have large amounts of virus needed to see if you had the SARS-CoV-2 virus. However, so let's say you did find War and Peace, right? You found it's the best of times to the worst of times. But that primer, that sentence, what if just the very beginning kind of found something? It was the best. So maybe you have somewhere in some of the books you've written, it was the best, and it finds that, and it finds some other little thing over here, and it starts copying that book. That's not War and Peace. It's something else. It didn't match completely. But let's say that happens on cycle 4, and it just like maybe there's one copy. Well, as you amplify it, the amount of War and Peace that you amplified, because it's a perfect match, should be way higher than any other little garbage that you start amplifying. However, in these PCR tests, they did so many cycles. So let's see if you didn't have a copy of War and Peace. Let's say you have no copy of War and Peace. Those primers, it was the best, it was the worst, and whatever that last sentence, do you think you could find those words somewhere in some of your books? Yeah, you probably could. So they would find them, and they would start copying some other book. And eventually they would make copies of something that wasn't what you were looking for. And that would give you a false positive. It wouldn't be War and Peace. It would have just gotten part of it. It was the best. That didn't have all of it, right?
Right.
And so that's why we got false positives, because there was garbage. But if you keep amplifying it, you can amplify garbage, not the real virus. So to take a step back, so that's hopefully kind of an explanation of how PCR works. It It matches two parts of the DNA and then copies everything in between, but it can copy the wrong thing. So again, what the study showed is only about 14% of those PCR tests represented real infections. So I want to talk about that, because what this is saying, and what many of us were saying, is there's a lot that could be going on. Let's say I'm exposed to the SARS-CoV-2 virus, but my immune system destroys it and I never actually get sick. Your innate immune system, especially in young people, especially in children, can destroy a virus and you never get sick, but you would still have residual virus in your nose and throat, as it would be dead. And so, but when they take that sample, it only takes like a couple of viruses to end up being PCR positive. And so the fact that you had some virus in your nose doesn't mean that you were carrying the infection, that you were producing active virus, that you were infectious. And so they're saying some of the people that were positive probably neutralized the virus and they never got ill. Other people, they may have been ill and they're better now. Like, remember, some people they would test them every 2 weeks after they had it, right? They're better now, but they still have some residual dead virus. Others of it can be like I was talking about with the copy of War and Peace, where you don't even have a copy of War and Peace, but it finds like the best of times. It finds the best of somewhere in something you have written and another sentence, and it copies that, and it's just garbage. It's not War and Peace. It's not the COVID virus. It's something else. And you have a false positive. So all of those different possibilities were possible for why we had such high positivity rates. And again, if you actually had a copy of the SARS-CoV virus, or we'll talk about like War and Peace, if you had one, you should only need 20 PCR cycles to see it. All right. Now remember, this is exponential. All right. This is exponential. So every time you do it, you're taking whatever number you had times itself. Okay.
Wow.
In order to, for these testings, they were using 40 to 45 cycles. Nothing above 25 to 30 cycles should ever have been allowed, because basically at that point, you're amplifying any garbage that's in the system. You're basically saying, yeah, we got one copy of something that, actually hooked on to, it was my best friend's wedding. You had the word best in it and it starts copying it, right? Just something totally inane. And then you put enough cycles on it and it's going to copy that. All right. So they were copying garbage. So I want to take a step back and say, this was basically saying this was the wrong metric to use, because what they're saying is there was a foundation, an institute that was actually measuring the antibodies that you got post-infection. So we know, as a reliable marker of immunology, that if you were infected and you tested positive with these antibodies, you were legitimately infected. You had gotten it, and you now have antibodies that actually tell you have some amount of immunity, right? So they were actually tracking that, and they could have gone on the television and said, hey, we're tracking this, and this is how many people actually had the virus. It would take a couple of weeks, so it would be kind of retrospective, but it would also give you a trend of how prevalent infection was at the time. Instead, they bolstered what they felt was rates of infection, because they basically, like 14% only had it, and they made it sound like it was 86% more people had it than did. Right. So that was a false metric when they had the correct data. Okay. They had the correct data. So I want to show a chart, and it's a little bit complicated, but there's some take homes that I want to take from this. So first, let's look at the top. Okay. And at the top are actually the antibody levels. Now, this is what they should have been showing on the TV, but they didn't. They showed the PCR totals. Okay. So this purple line that kind of goes up and down and up and down. And if you look at peaks right in the middle of 2021, those were the actual infection rates. And infection peaked in the middle of 2021. Now, then they stopped measuring antibody levels, and that's why it just sort of disappears. Nobody's really sure why. They decided they'd rather go with the PCR test. So that's when one of the peak times for infection. But I want you to look way back in 2020, okay? Do you see the peak there at the very beginning, the purple line peaking? They estimate that a quarter of people had SARS-CoV-2 COVID and had developed antibodies and were somewhat immune prior to 2021. So this was even prior to when we knew that there was an active epidemic. Okay. And so what this tells you, what that's very bothering to me, is that there were people that got very, very ill and got COVID and actually recovered before anyone knew there was an outbreak. So to me, it's like this was in Germany, but like our CDC is supposed to be looking for this kind of thing. So it's like until they wanted you to know it was there, it's like it didn't exist, even though the data tell us people were getting ill and recovering prior to when they told us the epidemic started. So it just highlights the fact that the narrative on TV is not reality. It's not what really happening. People can be actually getting an infection and dying. We could actually have an epidemic happening, and we would never know unless the television tells us it's happening. And that's really, really problematic. And some of us knew people, like my sister actually got really, really sick in December. Remember, it was like in March when they, 2 weeks to stop the spread. She got the sickest of her life in December and recovered. And so many people know people that actually had SARS-CoV-2 prior to when they told us. And so the thing is, if that was really happening, why wasn't our news covering it? Why wasn't the CDC aware? Why weren't our government aware and telling us? It's because whatever their narrative is, whatever it was that they wanted us to believe, it didn't go with that yet. They didn't want to start their little game until a certain time, right? You can't make me believe that they didn't have some sort of surveillance that wasn't catching some of these very severe. And my sister said, she's not really a germaphobe. And she was like, I was the sickest I've ever been in my life. I came home from the hospital. She actually went to the hospital. And she's like, I bleached my entire house. And she said she was working at a call center. She said almost everybody in the call center ended up in the hospital at some point. Where were the people catching these cases? And again, I do want to reiterate that these were in Germany. So I want to make a couple of other points regarding this graph. And that is that on this graph, so on the bottom, it shows this, there's a green line in the bottom, and that is actually the PCR positive test, okay? And you see that they're kind of low, and then they actually go higher in 2022. I'm not going to deal with that too much because, again, it was only 14% positivity. But here is when they actually did some complicated math, I'm just going with that, to measure the actual positivity rate. And again, they said it was only 14%. What we're seeing here on this black line and this magenta line that overlap, the magenta, again, the purple, is actually the antibody tests that show people who are actually infected. So what they did is they actually took cumulative infected. They said, how many people were infected, got better, and then the next people that were infected. So what percentage of the population? So here's 100 up at the top. What percentage of the population over time was infected and generated immunity? And what they showed was, one, some people were infected in 2020, but two, by the end of 2021, almost everybody had it, and almost everybody had recovered and had some level of immunity. So you'll see these positive cases in 2022, but those were Omicron. By the time people were getting it in 2022, they had already had it once, right? They were getting it like maybe they had it and they had like a year of immunity and then they got it. And the people who got it in 2022, it usually wasn't as severe. Okay. There were exceptions, obviously, usually wasn't as severe, but they wanted us to believe, but look at the PCR numbers. So they continued this fear mongering all through 2022 with the positive PCR test, knowing one, that it wasn't as severe infection because pretty much all of it was a second infection, which you already have immunity. So that usually is much less severe. In fact, a study out of the Cleveland Clinic showed that basically only 5% of people who had previously had SARS-CoV-2 might have a severe infection the next time. 95% of people or more immunity from that first infection was protective against any kind of severe infection. So again, this line that goes up shows that, and this was in Germany, by the end of 2021 and even through mid 2021, you're talking about 70% of people had been infected and developed immunity. So they could have just been like, okay, we've all got herd immunity, go back to work. And I want to stress one more thing about these PCR tests. So remember, so only 14% of these people who were tested PCR positive actually were infected. But remember, for every positive PCR test, everybody that you knew, they would shut down your classroom if anybody was at school. So my son was in school in New York, and if there was a positive PCR test, everybody who had been anywhere with that person now had to be quarantined for 2 weeks. And I remember that happened to my son, and it was maybe 2021. I'm not really even sure. It might have been 2022 even. It was fairly far along. And his whole group of friends had quarantined because they had been at a school event. And one of the young men had severe anxiety, and he had to quarantine alone in a basement apartment for 2 weeks when none of them that had to quarantine in their friend group actually got ill, because most likely the person who tested positive never had COVID to begin with, right? So the amount of stress and duress and just everything that people went through based on these fraudulent positive PCR tests was just really unconscionable. And as we know, some people who were not even ill had a positive PCR test, were treated with remdesivir, and then their kidney shut down, and they went through the standard protocol, and some of them died from medical malpractice because they had a positive PCR test. Because if you went into the hospital for a broken leg or some other kind of thing, they would give you a PCR test. Right. Yeah. And how much just dead COVID virus was floating around the hospital.
Right. And as you continue, Sister Tamara Muhammad, who was in emergency room and ER critical care COVID nurse at that time, would possibly come on in another time frame to talk about an article that she was interviewed for in the Final Call newspaper regarding how many of them, the nurses, and she was a traveling nurse too, but how they weren't required to take the test. They weren't required to do it. But continue, Dr. Parks.
No, so you can take these down. I think I've used that. If anyone has any questions about them, we can bring it back up. But I don't know if Dr. Ridgely is available or if anyone else wanted to make any comments or questions about that.
Let's add Dr. Ridgely to the stage. Dr. Ridgely?
Is my camera
yes.
on?
No, sir.
Okay.
We can hear you, but not see you.
I thought I was on. I was on there for a minute. Let's see here.
Right. My apologies.
I don't see it. Okay, there it is.
Okay, so he disconnected accidentally, but he'll come back. And let's bring in Sister
Hopefully he'll be back.
Yes. And Sister Pamela is here with us. Any remarks about what she shared as we wait for Dr. Ridgely to come back? You're muted. There you go.
Yes, ma'am. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Parks.
Walaikum salam, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, sister. That's an excellent presentation. I really did learn some things because I, like you, I'm familiar with several people who were ill prior to us really knowing that there was some virus out. So in the 2019s, the late 2019s, I think one of your listeners also commented, Sister Charlene, about that. I think there's a sister here. I got incredibly sick while flying at the end of January before they start talking about C-19. So yes, ma'am. Great presentation.
And so it really goes to like, how can we, like, this is probably going to happen again. Like, where can we get good information? They had good information. They had antibody levels. They had information that contradicted the narrative that could have corrected this public facade. And and so how do we, how do we hone in on that, and how do we not have this happen again, where the media just controls the narrative and we're forced to take, some people refused to take the PCR test and lost their jobs because they knew that this was a narrative being used, right? And they didn't want to be part of this game of the false positives. And I know my daughter had to have a surgery, and a dental surgery, and she has special needs. And we really didn't want to test her, because what if they test positive? The consequences of testing positive, one, you might not be able to do your surgery, and like all kinds of mess, have to quarantine, and who knows what. And so they actually like took the swab and like just touched the outside of her nose. So they were like, so there were people on our side, and the nurses and in the hospital. It wasn't like everybody was in on this, but everybody ended up basically getting coerced into this system. And so there's a really good question of, how do we prevent this kind of coercion into this narrative, into this system where they're using a false metric and they're not even presenting the real data?
Not at all. As we wait for Dr. Ritchie to come back, and if any of you have a sincere question, post it in the chat and we'll get it to Dr. Parks. I want to share something from Dr. Ava Muhammad. May I be pleased with her, if I may. And so let me do that. No. As we wait for Dr. Ritchie to come back. Here we go. Wow. This time frame that you're, this brings up a lot of memory. And so, and bear with me as I'm looking for Dr. Ritchie as well. So, as we know, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan told us not to take that shot. And we were not also, according to this article at that time, we were really many were mindful of the actual test itself. And so just to highlight some of it, Student Minister Dr. Ava Muhammad, a Star of God, who was the national spokesperson of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, in November 2021, she wrote how the COVID-19 PCR test is a companion weapon to the vaccine in the era of biological warfare against the original people. I also hear that Dr. Ritchie may be with us, and so I will move right now to bring him in. If so, no, I don't see him. Dr. Ritchie, I heard you pop in. Just try some more. Okay, so as you can see in this, go ahead. Anybody was going to say something? No. Okay.
I lost my train of thought. I was going to say something. Yeah, I was going to say, what some people aren't realizing it. There's a group of us who are still really kind of working at that's kind of called the doctrine of the ledger magistrates. It means if the top part of your government isn't doing their job, you need to go to the next one and see if they'll do their job. So, and one of the people who we're presenting right now, we're doing a lot of presentations in Idaho, and we're trying to get legislation passed to ban the vaccines. We've been to many local health boards in Idaho and Washington State to try to basically ban these vaccines at either the health department level or the state level, because here's the thing. These are basically a military industrial complex. That's who has done this project or whatever. And they're basically considered warfare countermeasures. And it's like we're at war, and these are countermeasures. So there will never be any liability. And there was no rules. There was no sort of testing at all. They started to do the testing, and they may have actually done the testing, but no testing was required at all to use these as military countermeasures. And because the COVID emergency is still in place till 2029, there is no liability for these products. So someone told me privately, because they didn't have the receipts to bear it up, that at the plant that they were at for the vaccine, I'm not going to say which vaccine it was, they were actually receiving shipments of vaccine from China in unmarked bags. So like, did our government subcontract China to like send vaccine over? And like, and like, what was that? Was it all the same thing? Was it from different manufacturing plants? Because they were considered military countermeasures, they basically did not have to meet any standards from the FDA, from our own government, and they still don't have to meet any standards. And so this is why we are still actually going to anyone who will listen to us and explain. And that is the reason it doesn't matter how many deaths there are from the vaccine, how many adverse events, how many young men get myocarditis, because there's no liability and no accountability, because they're considered military countermeasures. And so the same thing will happen with the next event. And that means they can do whatever they want. They can spray anything in the air. They can do whatever they want as long as they put it under the blanket of a military countermeasure.
Woo, you're bringing up a lot of memories, Dr. Parks, and you're right.
I know everyone's going into PTSD. Well, we're still dealing with this. We're still trying to get someone to be accountable, right? There's a group of us who have not stopped, and Nick Holcher, who was on this, is a regular in those. First, it was Peter McCullough, and then when Nick sort of took over many of his responsibilities for doing some of this public-facing work, Nick comes to those to give this data on a lot of the vaccine injury, the cancer rates, and some of these studies. So there's a group of us who just keep pressing to because if we don't, like, the same thing will happen.
Thank God for you all. Thank God for you all. And some of you we've spoken to, I've interviewed, as I don't want to just say that he's in that group, but I just want to talk about in terms of the scientists and doctors who are really working on this for us all, like Dr. James Thorpe. You mentioned Mr. Holcher. One of the things I saw most recently on his pages, his platform, is information verifying what we were saying, what we were taught and being told in the run-up, what we saw, what you all saw and reported to me and us about the impact of this technology on pregnant women and fetuses. Let's see, I think I heard Dr. Ridgely come. Let's try this. Go ahead, Dr. Parks, your remarks about that.
Yeah, Dr. Thorpe is part of that group and has testified. He's a practicing OBGYN who is actually seeing these patients that are dealing with hemorrhaging, with fertility issues. And he is widely, probably the best published on this topic regarding COVID and the COVID vaccine and its impact on infant mortality and on pregnancy. And So yes, and on my website, vi-ta.org, if you go to the COVID-19 page, you will see under mechanism of injury, if you go to maternal health and infant health, there's a video by Dr. Thorpe that goes through some of those data. So you can access that resource there.
Continue, I'm going.
So yeah, so this is basically, I think, has reduced, the COVID vaccine has reduced pregnancy rates by 30% in the vaccinated. Those have gone down 30%. And of course, we know from Pfizer's own data that there was basically an 80% miscarriage rate for those who got the vaccine in the first trimester of pregnancy. So this is absolutely devastating. And so when you talk about it being a bioweapon, its impact on our fertility and on our future health is absolutely catastrophic. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Ridgely.
Welcome back.
They took me out and they wouldn't let me get back in. Tried 5 times. So I'm on shortly. I'm sure they're going to take me out again. Because this is warfare. Now, what I was going
to... Oh, it looks like we may have lost him again, unfortunately.
Am I on now?
Yes, we can hear you. What were you going to say?
I was saying that back in June of 2020, 21, I did an article, and it was talking about that in the flu season. I'll read it to you. According to a February 14th NPR report, where did the flu go? Homebound kids shape a mild season. The flu was almost non-existent for the 2021 flu season, it states. However, the seasonal flu, which during the 2019-2020 flu season, some 400,000 people were hospitalized for the flu, with 22,000 deaths, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Last week, just ahead of the season's usual peak, the CDC had recorded just 165 flu-related hospitalizations since October. Now, according to the CDC, the common flu and COVID-19 have some similar symptoms, that the only way to know if you had COVID-19 or the flu is to be tested for COVID-19. It is possible that the tests are confusing the now missing flu viruses with COVID-19. So now we come to, as Dr. Parks is talking about, this defective PCR test to give you false positives. Now the CDC admits that the only way that you know whether you got COVID or you got the flu is to take the test. Because
right,
all
and
the
if
symptoms
the
are
test,
the same.
a large batches of the test, I believe, were contaminated with virus. And so there, because I mean, DNA can get around very easily, or even RNA. So if there was contaminating COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2 DNA, and it's anywhere, it could be dead, it's dead. But you get a positive test because the test is contaminated, because the environment is contaminated, and really you have the flu, but you have a positive PCR test, and so they're going to say you have COVID. And even worse, they may treat you like you have COVID, because then you're isolated. Like, how many people were isolated from their families, and their families weren't allowed to see them? You went in because you broke your ankle, and now you're isolated away from your family, and they want to give you remdesivir or something terrible like that.
And they won't let you take anything else.
Right.
In other words, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, your doctors can't prescribe it for you. If you go into the hospital, your family members cannot bring it to you. So they denied treatments, gave you a false test.
When they published those two completely fraudulent studies on hydroxychloroquine, trying to show that hydroxychloroquine didn't work, and they were fraudulent from beginning to end. There was not like some data points that were screwed up. No, they were just completely made up, and they were published in the leading journals of the world. So that lets you know that this was from people at a very, very high level that were perpetuating whatever this scam was. And when that happened, I had been studying hydroxychloroquine for about 5 months, since December, when the outbreak had started in China. And it was during the summer when those papers came out. And when this all started, I thought that this was biological warfare between us and the Chinese. And I thought, well, we have the science to combat this. And the data on hydroxychloroquine were just amazing. And, there were there were decades of science showing it as an antiviral, and showing that it had bound and neutralized the first SARS-CoV-1. And so when they destroyed the credibility of hydroxychloroquine, I grieved for weeks, because I realized this isn't biological warfare of the Chinese against us. This is our own government or multinational whatever agencies that are trying to destroy us. It's our own government, our own institutions, our own media that are all in cahoots and I realized they want enough people to die to scare everyone into taking the vaccine, which I understood intuitively was the real weapon, but they want to scare everyone with enough deaths. They are going to kill millions of Americans to inculcate a state of fear, because hydroxychloroquine has a very long half-life in the body. You can take very, very small amounts, and it's very, very safe. Lots of children take it for autoimmune diseases like lupus. And so you could have taken very, very small amounts, and it prevented transmission. So everyone could have taken $5 worth of hydroxychloroquine, and we could have been done with this. But they wanted millions of people to die in order to, and that's why remember you couldn't get a test at first. They didn't want you to test positive. They wanted you to get sick enough at home that you had to come in on your last legs, die, scare everybody. I mean, I'm laughing now, but I grieved for months, because when I realized this is not us against a different nation, this is the highest levels of whatever it is that's ruling over us, has decided to perpetuate this on all of us.
Well, this is why, as a student of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and we are taught that you cannot fathom the wickedness of Satan. And so when you look at all these things, it's evidently that somebody is trying to destroy humanity.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, but when you have the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who has already warned us that you have a people on the planet who, if they can't rule you, then they will kill you. Because the only thing they want is for you to be their slave. This goes all the way back to when they were made on the island of Pelon. And they're carrying that same type of idea. Either you be our slave or we'll kill you. And if our own people, meaning other white people, if they will not bow, then we'll kill them too. As a matter of fact, when we're tired of them because they're waking up, we're going to replace them with robots. So we have to kill them and make them think that it's a virus. Even though they know about SARS-CoV-1 and how to cure it, they knew about SARS-CoV-2 and how to cure it. The one who invented it also got patented on the virus and the shot and the cure.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so this is warfare, and it's kind of hard to understand any of this unless you have studied the teaching of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and been listening to Minister Farrakhan. When July 4th, 2020, he stood before the world 6 months before the shots came out and said, "Do not take the shots. It's death itself." So now that German study is coming out, everything is bearing witness to the reality that we've been in a war against the elite, small percent trying to control and destroy any human who would not become their slave.
Well, and I'm sure as well, that in terms of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's teaching, he also told people not to take the polio vaccine. And now we know that the polio vaccine was contaminated with a monkey virus that causes cancer. So, and that monkey virus, once you have it from the polio vaccine, you can spread it to your children, to your family. So it has actually been spread transgenerationally, and it is now associated with several different types of cancer, most namely mesotheliomas. So, this is guidance that obviously can be trusted. So.
So you're right ahead, Dr. Parks.
Well, and so the next question is what do they plan to do to us next? And that's why, I know she had my website. I think that all of us need to have an emergency, medical kit with hydroxychloroquine, with ivermectin, with vitamin C, with vitamin D, with zinc. And we need to do everything that we can to keep our health in order, because we never know, like they'll think, I don't even hardly listen to what they think, people say they're going to do next, because I don't know, they keep changing it so much. And I'm waiting for real credible evidence that this is the next step. But I think that it started, and so if you do join my website, I do have a lot of different videos on how to deal with respiratory infection, how to deal with viral infection. So on the front facing pages, I have a whole thing on the contamination of the Pfizer vaccine. Many people don't realize under mechanism of injury, if you tap on that plasmid contamination of the Pfizer vaccine, that the Pfizer vaccine was contaminated with plasmid that is basically a self-replicating infectious agent that can infect everybody, regardless of vaccination status, and cause their cells to make the spike protein. So it's basically like a passive vaccine. It can get into everyone. And this plasmid that contaminated the Pfizer vaccine, and I have like a whole lecture on it to take you through step by step, because the science is fairly complex. Never thought I'd be trying to explain this to lay people. This is how you actually know I have a degree, right? I'm not just one of those people who made it up.
Thank God for you.
This contamination, they are finding cancers that have hundreds of these plasmids, these self-replicating infectious agents in the cancer cells. Because interestingly enough, I talked about the polio vaccine that had this monkey virus. This monkey virus was so interesting. They took parts of it and started to use it for molecular biology, because there were regulatory elements of this monkey virus called simian virus 40, SV40. These regulatory elements actually really strongly drive activation of DNA in humans, in mammals. And so they use this in these plasmids, these SV40 promoters, origin of replication. What this means is, in order to make the vaccine, they only needed this to work in bacteria. They only needed to work in bacteria. So why are the regulatory elements designed to work in humans? The regulatory elements, these monkey elements, are designed to work in humans. That means that if this self-replicating infectious agent gets into your bacteria and replicates, it can jump from the bacteria into your cells, travel through your body, get into your cells, and direct your cells to start making the spike protein. And this is typically found so far in people who have been vaccinated, but it is a potentially in the unvaccinated. They have done biopsies of tumors and found hundreds of copies of this plasmid, this self-replicating infectious agent that is driven by the simian virus 40, the monkey virus promoter. Yeah, and I have Kevin McKernan is doing excellent work on this.
Well, you're supposed to be taking a booster after a booster after a booster.
If you're still alive.
Remember all the variants? I couldn't keep up,
Right.
even though I did. But
so
when you mentioned Omicron,
but now they have a serious problem that people are not taking. Not only they're not taking the boosters,
right?
Then they don't want the flu vaccine. They don't want the vaccines being put in their children now. This is exposed the whole backdrop of the immunity of the pharmaceutical industry to do whatever they wanted to do since 1986. Put anything out there, stick it in the children, and you couldn't sue them. So This war has been going on since 1986 for real. At least before then, you could sue somebody. I know people who got money from their child being, hurt by these vaccines, but now they changed so you can't even sue them. So now, since the Netanyahu, for instance, he got his whole country as a lab for Pfizer. Okay. Everybody in Israel is supposed to take the shot, Pfizer's shot, and then all the data from their health and the results of it was supposed to be given to Pfizer. And then when they asked Netanyahu, where is the contract that you made with Pfizer? And he can't find it. So
he can't find it?
Can't find it. That's what he said. He can't find it. So now Israel is continually at war, because if they stop having a war, then they're going to take Netanyahu to trial.
Right.
And so you can't have that, because he's going to be
I remember at the time I was a conservative Christian at the time. And, I had believed a lot of the Zionist propaganda, actually. And as a scientist, I remember when Netanyahu basically handed over his entire population on a silver platter to be slaughtered by this vaccine. I remember, as Forrest Gump would say, what did he say? Like, evil is as evil does, or good is as good does. Like, you are what you do. So if you are doing this to your people. You are not a person of God. And that right there in that one moment changed my entire, how I saw him. And I was just like, oh my gosh, it was just like a shocking moment. I'm like, this person is not led by God in any way, shape, or form. And I started, seeing things very differently. Of course, that was quite a few years ago, and we're in 2026. Can you believe it? And I do want to say that I do on my website, Vita, for members, have a spike detox protocol. So wherever you think you might be getting the spike protein, whether you were vaccinated, whether you've had COVID, whether you're concerned about this plasmid contamination, because none of us really know if we have it, if you're just having some health issues, all of the things that I mentioned are just generally healthy anyway, for the most part. So once you join Vita, you would have access to the spike detox protocol. So you just go to the main page and join, and that would be good. But tons of information there to share with family and friends as well. Yeah, you can go where it says join Vita. So.
And it's so important that people do that, because one cure cures all of them. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Because this is why
one of the things they don't want us to know that these herbals are so antiviral. And I found something, it was published in 2020 in Nature, that showed brown seaweed had a component in it called fucoidin that would actually bind the SARS-CoV-2 virus very, very tightly. And it's something you could eat, and it would bind it in your gut and prevent it from getting into your body when you had COVID. So again, something that was dirt cheap that could prevent, especially in children, could have prevented some of the in very, small cases where they had multiple inflammatory disorders, could have prevented some of those and may have prevented transmission. We don't know. But they don't want you to know about these simple things. And that's why I talk about them. And, one of my heart is to sort of bring up this ancestral knowledge that isn't based on petrochemicals and funding the pockets of the Rockefellers, right? And sort of to validate the science. Some of the science has already been done. It's just that it's not widely known because it doesn't make anybody any money. And so I'm pulling up the science that's already been done, and would love to, as time goes on, start a foundation to really, really do really good science on things that can help our people that are our ancestral knowledge.
And until we establish our own medical system again, with our own medical schools and our hospitals, we in 1923, Black people had 200 hospitals in 1923. So until we can get that established again, we can use the internet through avenues like what you are doing with Vita to begin to get to the more basic natural solutions. This planet was made to be a heaven for us. There's something on this planet that will help any problem that we have on this planet. Right. We had figured out over millions of years how to use the things on this planet to heal us. But now they have cut it. This system is cutting that off, so we don't know anything except what they make up in their laboratory and give us to say, take this will help you. No. So now, since everybody knows we've been took this past time, we know they're going to try to take us again. So people like you and what you're doing can get people prepared for the next thing they do, because they do it like an old record. They're coming back again.
Right. And that's the thing, there are so many things that can work. And when they found even things like lemon water had a positive impact, and people, one of the things that, it really changed. Like, I kind of knew that there were natural things that would work, but when I got COVID and I got pretty sick, I started using these things. I started nebulizing, a hydrogen peroxide. I started taking ivermectin. I started taking hydroxychloroquine. I started, I had taken vitamin C, but I did these protocols, and they were so effective that I have never gone back to cold medicine since. And even though I knew it up here, when I actually did it and saw the impact and how effective it was, it really changed my whole perspective and the whole way now that my family, like I kind of knew about it before, but now these are the protocols I use. And of course, for members, we have the FLCC respiratory protocols. We have the respiratory protocols by Dr. Brownstein. We have all of those things so that you can be prepared. And that's what I want people to know. And my next step is hopefully to start training practitioners so that they understand the power of herbs, the power of how to treat some of these things differently, or just to understand some of the mechanisms, the things that they didn't really learn in this current system, so that we can make a paradigm shift.
With what you just said about you having the practitioners, because they were lied to. They were trained incorrectly. They were lied to in their training. And now people like Dr. McCullough, and what's the other one? The guy who
Pierre Corey.
Well, Corey is I can't think, because I had a picture of him, me and him in the final call, but we met down in Florida when they had the conference down there in Florida. But anyway, they say they were lied to. So they need people like you to re-educate them into this other whole level that they were not taught about in school. They were not even taught about vaccines, other than that it works.
So that's funny that you should say that. I was in an event with Dr. Peter McCullough where he was the headliner. And so at the end, I was just in the audience. I wasn't supposed to speak. They had a panel of, Dr. Merrick.
That's him. Right.
Yeah. And he pioneered a whole treatment for sepsis in hospitals, and nobody wants to use it, even though it was very effective, using vitamin C and thiamine and some steroids. But anyway, with Dr. McCullough, we were at this event, and at the end, they had a panel of doctors. And so the audience started asking questions it was mostly like about the COVID vaccine and stuff, and some other vaccines. And the doctors actually couldn't answer them because, as well-meaning as they were, they didn't know. They hadn't been taught it. And so finally, one of the doctors was like, Dr. Parks, I know you can answer these. Please come on up. He was a neurosurgeon, and so I came up. And as people asked questions, they started asking about the childhood vaccines. As I started answering them, at that time, Dr. McCullough was saying, well, we're not worried about the childhood vaccines. This is just the COVID vaccine. So as I came up, I didn't, I never worried about whether he thought I was a conspiracy theorist. I knew it was based on facts. So I started answering all of the problems about the childhood schedule and the childhood vaccines. And he just kind of looked at me like, okay, but it's interesting. And so that was probably in 2022. That now, he's been very vocal, and so is Nick Hulcher, who works with him on the McCullough Foundation, about the childhood vaccines and the lack of data there. So these doctors who really had not been trained, now from basically circulating with a lot of us who've been in this battle for a very long time, have learned the truth about the childhood vaccination schedule and are very seriously promoting that information.
I bear witness. I just had to bear witness. I did, when we first started out and just observing you, Dr. Ridgely, and the work that you do and did, and your writing, and just you as well, and of course others for the final call, but also you, Dr. Parks, to see you come in. I really am going to play that clip. I'm going to play it after you go. You all, I promise, God willing, to play that clip from when we fell in love with her. I was first introduced to her. And then, as I said, Minister Ava assigned me to speak with her and interview with her. But you and many, many, many more. But Dr. Parks, when you came, it just like the whole light bulb went on for me, and I started to understand it more. But continue on, you two. I really am enjoying the dialogue because I like to find what you're talking about to give that visual. So take it away.
No, I mean, and I think that's it. I remember when I was speaking on the COVID vaccines and COVID locally in West Michigan, after I was done, I wouldn't have said anything about the childhood vaccines, and people would come up to me and say, what did I do to my children? What did I do to my children? And now with the rates of autism, and, can we just stop calling it autism and start calling it brain damage? I mean, that's what we've done to our children. That's right. It is horrifying to think that, but it's the truth. It's the truth.
And let me say this. One of the tactics in warfare is they say, don't injure a soldier. I mean, don't kill a soldier, injure a soldier. Then they'll take 2 other soldiers to take him off the field and take him to the ambulance. And so what they have done is poison children. Now, once that child is poisoned and is helpless, now the whole family must get involved with that child. And so instead of a child being a thing of joy and a hope for the future, now the child becomes a burden. And so people don't even want to have a child, because the child might come up with some type of autoimmune disease or some type of brain damage. People are afraid to even reproduce. So this shows you the enemy is Satan, is a human being who don't like the fact that we don't die, we multiply. So they get into the very process of destroying your desire to have a child by poisoning, getting you to assist in poisoning the child with some stuff they're going to shoot up in this child when it's first born.
Well, and now, because of what they're spraying in the sky, the Wi-Fi, like the destruction of the microbiome, there are a lot of children being born now that are unvaccinated, that are on the spectrum or have different symptoms of what's going on. It's hyperinflammation. It's the toxic load in these children that their systems just can't tolerate. But here's what's really interesting, because God is the best of planners. I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's a whole community of non-speaking autistic children, and they learned how to speak. And what they figured out is that this is a gross motor issue, that they're completely cognitively normal. And many of them, their parents thought they were 2 or 3 intellectually, because I'd say point to C and they'd point to A. Well, the harder they would try to do something, the more their body would do something else. And so what they taught them to do was poke into like a dental board of letters, and they helped them to gain control, because your shoulder is a lot easier to control than, like, say, typing or writing. And now they're spelling, and these young adults have gone to college. And what they found is that there was a population of these non-speakers that were astral projecting, and they were all going to this place on the hill. And when they started spelling and they started communicating with their families, they'd say, yes, we go to this place on the hill, and I'm actually dating, who's Suzanne or whatever, and they would give them their address and their name, and the parent would look up these people and they would actually exist, and they would have another non-speaker. And so here's the thing. There's this large community of very, very highly intelligent, because here's the thing, autism, the inflammation in the brain, it does cause problems on one side, on one level, but on the other side, it actually accelerates the development of, say, language. So a lot of autistic people are hyperlexic. That means they can read by the time they're 2 years old. And so it accelerates some forms of intelligence while obviously causing issues with some motor development. And so these are many times very, very highly cognitively intelligent people who are actually astral projecting and going and meeting with other people on this hill, which kind of begs the question, what do they know that we don't know? Is the CIA going to be after them to figure out what they know? Because they're functioning in a totally different dimension than we are.
Well, that's what Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, that Jesus knew how to use the radio in his head. And so what's happening is that we have faculties that tie us into each other and into the universe, but we don't use those faculties because they dumb us down in their educational system. Okay, and so when someone is taken out of that system and out of the whole cognitive world, they go into another world. And that world is the one that these scientists would love to get to, but Allah is doing his thing and how he does it. So that's why, even though we may bring things to the world that seems like it's bad, but in actuality, there is a God. And he is going to make sure that his children will be able to survive on the planet that he made for his children. So no matter what the enemy does, Allah God will figure a way around that issue. And we have leaders like the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and leaders like you who come from different directions at the enemy that the enemy did not plan. And so there's things happening that we might not know about, but Allah is doing things to fix it. And this is why the enemy's world is unraveling while our world is just getting started.
And so I'll end and let her do her clip with now know how to access our kids, our non-speakers. And you can, there's a site called Communication for All, I believe.com. And I'm actually, my daughter's nonverbal. She's not autistic, but I'm actually starting it with her because she's nonverbal. And I realized it's a motor apraxia. And not, there's still obviously a lot of cognitive function there. So if that's something you're interested in, I believe it's on March 10th. Yeah, that I'm going to have a colleague come on and talk about motor apraxia, talk about Communication for All, talk about how we're opening up whole worlds to these non-speakers, because we have millions of children and young adults worldwide with autism that are on the spectrum that are non-speakers. I think maybe 30 million non-speakers worldwide. That is a huge population. And we know that our community is disproportionately affected. And so I'm really interested to see what God will do with this. And if that is something that's on your heart, definitely get in contact with me. Definitely show up to my VITA presentation on March 10th. And this is going to be an area, I think, where I'm going to be much more active going forward.
Oh my gosh, I just thought about your beautiful daughter when you said that, and all of the other children. Dr. Parks, thank you so much. Any closing remark, Dr. Ritchie, that you would like to add? And I know you just said that, Dr. Parks, and I think Sister Pamela might not be there. But Dr. Ritchie, before we play the video and go on out for this evening, any final remarks for now?
No, just March 22nd, we're going to start the staple goods number 26 to get your house ready, to have what you need to stay in the house in case it gets too bad outside. So go to Sister Dr. Parks to VITA to learn how to deal with your inside, and come to the Staple Goods Project to have the stuff in your house that you can put on your inside so you don't have to go outside.
Gotcha.
And there it is. You were so fast, I was trying to get it, but there it is. Staple Good 27. Ordering begins March 22nd. Thank you, Dr. Ritchie. Thank you, Dr. Parks. Thank you, Sister Attorney Pamela. That's it for today. Everyone stay tuned. I'll play the video. I'm going to play the full 8 minutes of it. And thank you to the Nation of Islam Research Group for making this available. Peace and blessings, and assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Walaikum salam, ma'am.
Love it, love it.
Hello, my name is Dr. Christina Parks. I received my Ph.D. in Cellular and Molecular Biology right here in the state of Michigan from University of Michigan Medical School. And so I'm very well versed in the science of both these mRNA, gene therapy, vaccines, this kind of technology, as well as what a vaccine is designed to do in the body, what it can do, what it can't do, and the fact that this is extremely complex science that has been oversimplified in the media to basically take away our freedom of choice. What I want to address today in this limited time is the fact that vaccine requirements and mandates are based on the faulty assumption that the vaccines in question prevent transmission of the pathogen, right? Does the vaccine for DTaP prevent transmission? No. Does the vaccine for flu prevent transmission? No. Do the vaccines for COVID prevent transmission? No. In fact, they were never designed to do that. All right, so you're asking, what about this 95% effectiveness? If you look at those clinical trials, they do not say that they prevent transmission. They expressly say that they're measuring whether they attenuate symptoms. So they're 95% effective based on their clinical trials at attenuating symptoms for the first variant, which is essentially gone in our population. Right now, the predominant variant is a Delta, and CDC Director Walensky basically said that these vaccines have no ability to prevent infection by and transmission of the Delta variant. So our policy needs not to be built on the hope of what we think something we want it to do, but what the data actually tell us. So do these viruses do the vaccines prevent the virus from infecting and replicating in the nose and nasopharynx? No, they've only been shown to prevent that replication in the lungs. They're different. The mucosa is very different than the lungs. It's very different than the blood. You inject it to the blood, you make antibodies in your blood. The virus isn't infecting your blood, it's infecting your mucosa, and you don't produce any IgA to neutralize it. In fact, recent studies have shown that the vaccinated, especially with the Delta variant, and the unvaccinated have similar amounts of virus in their nose and throat. In Barnstable, Massachusetts, the CDC tracked an outbreak of 469 cases of COVID. 74% occurred in fully vaccinated, and 4 out of 5 of those hospitalized were vaccinated. All right, so maybe they are mandating this because they just didn't know with the COVID. And so my main complaint is with our health agencies and the CDC, who basically know better and are misleading the public. So let's look at DTaP, which the scientists and the CDC have known since 2014 that the acellular pertussis vaccine does not prevent people from getting infected with the pertussis bacteria and passing it to others. In fact, it was never designed to do that. The vaccine was designed to neutralize the pertussis toxin. Pertussis, we know it as whooping cough. It can be fatal for children under 6 months. So neutralizing this toxin saves lives, all right? I'm not going to debate that. But what it doesn't do is neutralize the bacteria. So what happens is fully vaccinated children go to daycare, they pick up that bacteria, and they come home and they give it to their newborn brother or sister. They get deathly ill and they go to the hospital. Hopefully our medical professionals are able to save them. But who do they blame? Now the CDC is blaming anti-vaxxers for the limitations of this vaccine design. I suggest that they be transparent and tell parents that although it is preventing severe disease in their children, it is not preventing transmission, because we have created a whole class of asymptomatic pertussis carriers who are increasing the disease. Now, the old DTP vaccine that many of you who are my age or older got did prevent transmission. When we switched to the safer acellular version, they knew that it was never designed to prevent transmission. It was safer, it had less adverse events, but pertussis cases have gone through the roof. There's a resurgence in pertussis because of the design of the vaccine, and the vaccinologists know this. They're trying to address it, and so we cannot mandate that something that does not prevent transmission. All right, what about the flu vaccine? Well, they have shown that basically there's no difference, there's no statistical difference if you're vaccinated or unvaccinated, whether you get the flu or not. But it's even worse because although the first year it is somewhat effective, it's about 65% effective at preventing symptoms in you, after that, it actually has negative efficacy. And I want to address this because it's very important. Vaccines are made to a specific variant. And when that variant mutates, the vaccine no longer recognizes it. And so it's like you're seeing a completely new virus. And because that's so, you actually get more severe symptoms when you're vaccinated against one variant, and then it mutates, and then your body sees the other variant. So there's the potential, and the science shows that in fact, with the flu, if you get vaccinated in multiple years, you are more likely to get severe disease, you are more likely to have more viral replication, and you are more likely to be hospitalized, both in adults and in children. We are seeing the same thing in COVID with the Delta variant. And so we are mandating that people get a vaccine that could actually make them more sick when they're exposed to the virus. In fact, this week, a paper came out, and what it showed is that with this Delta variant, when you're vaccinated, your body makes antibodies that are supposed to neutralize the virus, but they were supposed to neutralize the old variant. When they see this new variant, what they're doing is the antibodies are taking the virus and helping it infect the cells. All right, that science was just published this week. We need to be looking at the science, and we need our policy to reflect the science, and we also need it to reflect our rights. And so, as a PhD who knows the science, I'm in the category of the most vaccine hesitant group. Yes, PhDs are the most vaccine hesitant, followed by people who have less than a high school degree because they know what they don't know and they don't trust their government. And many people, the other group that is very vaccine hesitant are African Americans. 70% of African Americans have not taken this vaccine. Why? Because they don't trust their government. Do they have reason not to trust their government? Well, between the years of 1930 and 1970, the CDC conducted the Tuskegee experiment, where they took untreated males with syphilis and they refused to treat them. Even after antibiotics became available, they still did not treat them, and they did not tell them that they had syphilis. They told those people that they were there to secure their health, and they did not secure their health. They abused them. You say, well, that was in the past, although I don't think 1970 was that long ago. Well, in 2012, whistleblower William Thompson came forward and said, we published a study that said MMR does not cause autism, but we lied. In fact, we shredded data that showed that when Black boys are vaccinated on time, they have increased rates of autism diagnosis, and we shredded it and we left it out of the paper. As an African American and a PhD, I want to ask each of you, are we going to exclude 70% of African American people from the workforce and from education? Right? My ancestors did not work this hard. I come up from a family that worked very hard, and I'm very aware that my privileges are dependent on the work of my grandmother and my great-grandmother, and I have great respect for these people that put me where I am. And yet you're telling me that my son will not be able to be educated if, based on the history of African Americans in this country, that he doesn't want to be vaccinated? Right. So I will leave you with that question. Who are we going to exclude from the workforce? Are we going to continue with discrimination and segregation in the United States of America? Thank you.